The sound was unmistakable. The snap of a VHS case closing, the rustle of a plastic bag, the chime of automatic doors sliding open into a Friday night that felt full of possibility. You'd step inside, and the light would hit you first. Bright, clean, almost electric, cutting through the evening dark. Blue and yellow and everywhere. Rows and rows of movies stretching back farther than you could see in one glance. The faint smell of popcorn drifting from the counter. Your family beside you, already debating, comedy or action, something everyone could agree on. One movie, one night, one ritual that felt like it would last forever. For a generation of Americans, this wasn't just a store, it was the weekend. It was where you went when school let out for summer, when the weather turned cold, when you wanted to feel like you had the whole world of stories at your fingertips. Blockbuster Video. The name alone brings it back. The aisles, the new release wall, the agony of finding your pick already rented, the late fees, the membership cards tucked into every wallet. Today, one store remains. Just one. The rest are gone. 9,000 locations erased, their signs taken down, their shelves emptied, their lights turned off. What happened to the place that defined American weekends? How does something so woven into daily life just disappear? This is the story of Blockbuster, not the version you think you know, but the one that got left behind in the quiet spaces between memory and progress. The story begins not with a movie, but with a problem. It was 1985, and home video was still young, still finding its shape. VCRs had finally become affordable enough that ordinary families could bring one home, plug it into the television, and suddenly the idea of watching a movie whenever you wanted felt like magic. But renting those movies? That was a different experience entirely. Most video rental stores back then were small, cramped operations tucked into strip mall corners or converted storefronts. The lighting was dim. The organization was haphazard at best. Shelves were cluttered with unmarked tapes, and you never quite knew if the movie you wanted was actually in stock or if someone had misfiled it 3 aisles over. The selection was limited. The atmosphere felt vaguely unwelcoming, sometimes even seedy, with back rooms cordoned off by beaded curtains. For families, it wasn't always a comfortable place to browse. And the technology behind the counter? A handwritten ledger and a prayer that customers would return what they rented. David Cook saw all of this, and he saw something else too. Opportunity. Cook wasn't a Hollywood insider or a tech visionary. He was a Texas entrepreneur who had made his money in software and oil services, and he understood systems, databases, inventory management. He looked at the chaos of video rental and thought it could be done better, bigger, smarter. He imagined a store that didn't feel like a back alley operation, but like a real business, a place families would actually want to visit. Bright, organized, professional, a supermarket for movies. In October of 1985, the first Blockbuster Video opened in Dallas, Texas, at the corner of Skillman Street and Northwest Highway. It didn't look like the rental shops people were used to. It was huge, over 6,000 square feet, with wide aisles and fluorescent lighting that made everything feel clean and open. The walls were painted bright blue and yellow, colors that would become unmistakable. And inside, there were 8,000 VHS tapes, more than most competitors carried in total, organized not by someone's best guess, but by a computerized inventory system that tracked every single tape in real time. Walk through those doors in 1980, and you'd feel the difference immediately. The carpet was new. The shelves were labeled clearly. divided by genre with bold, easy-to-read signs. Comedy, drama, action, family. The tapes themselves were displayed spine out in uniform rows, and if you wanted to know whether a title was available, an employee could check the computer in seconds. No more wandering, no more guessing. It was efficient in a way that felt almost revolutionary for the time. But it wasn't just the system that made Blockbuster different. It was the philosophy. Cook wanted a family-friendly environment, a place where parents wouldn't hesitate to bring their kids on a Friday night. So Blockbuster made a choice early on: no adult films. That decision set it apart immediately, signaling to communities that this was a store for everyone. The logo itself, a bright torn ticket stub, felt playful and inviting, like the beginning of an experience rather than a transaction. And people responded. That first store in Dallas was busy from the start. Families came in after dinner, wandering the aisles together, debating titles, discovering movies they'd never heard of. Blockbuster offered something the smaller shops couldn't: selection and certainty. You could actually find what you were looking for. And if you couldn't, there were so many other options that it didn't matter. The experience became part of the appeal. Cook knew he had something. Within a year, he began opening more locations across Texas, each one following the same model: big, bright, computerized, family-focused. Franchises started spreading to other states. Investors took notice. By 1987, just 2 years after that first store opened, there were over 100 Blockbuster locations, and the brand was beginning to show up in cities and suburbs across the country. It was right place, right time. America in the mid-'80s was suburbanizing rapidly. Families were moving into planned communities with strip malls and wide parking lots. They had VCRs now, and they wanted content to play on them. Blockbuster arrived just as that hunger was peaking, offering not just movies, but a destination, a reason to leave the house, a ritual that fit neatly into the rhythm of American family life. And then, in 1987, David Cook sold the company. Blockbuster was growing fast, maybe faster than he'd anticipated, and a businessman named Wayne Huizenga, who had built waste management into a national empire, saw the same potential Cook had seen 3 years earlier. Huizenga bought Blockbuster and immediately began scaling it with the kind of aggressive expansion that had defined his previous ventures. He opened stores at a blistering pace, sometimes several a day. He standardized everything: the layout, the lighting, the uniforms, the training. Blockbuster wasn't just a chain anymore. It was becoming a system, a brand with a personality that people recognized no matter what city they were in. By the end of the '80s, Blockbuster was no longer a Texas experiment. It was a national presence. The blue and yellow signs were appearing in towns large and small, and the name itself was entering the American vocabulary. People didn't say, "Let's rent a movie." They said, "Let's go to Blockbuster." It had become shorthand for the experience itself, and the experience was just beginning. The late '80s and early '90s belonged to Blockbuster in a way few brands ever truly own a moment in American life. It wasn't just that the stores were everywhere, though they were, spreading across strip malls and shopping centers like wildflowers after rain. It was that Blockbuster became the answer to a question families asked every week: what are we doing tonight? By 1990, there were over 1,000 locations. By 1992, more than 2,500. The expansion was relentless, methodical, impossible to miss. Drive through any suburb, any mid-sized town, and eventually you'd see it. That torn ticket logo, those unmistakable colors glowing against the evening sky. Blockbuster didn't just fill a need, it created a destination. The stores themselves were designed for lingering. Rows and rows of tapes, organized by genre, alphabetized within each section, labeled with bright plastic cases that caught the light. The new release wall dominated the front of every store. Dozens of copies of the latest Blockbuster films, stacked spine out so you could see availability at a glance. There was a thrill in finding what you wanted still on the shelf. There was a strange disappointment, almost a challenge, when it wasn't. Blockbuster's advertising made the brand feel like part of the national conversation. Television commercials featured upbeat music, families laughing, couples deciding on date night, kids racing down aisles. The tagline changed over the years, but the message stayed consistent. Blockbuster was where movies lived. "Wow, what a difference," one early campaign declared, and it wasn't hyperbole. Compared to the dim rental shops of the early 80s, Blockbuster genuinely felt like stepping into the future. The membership card became a small symbol of belonging. Everyone had one. Parents kept them in wallets. Teenagers carried them like ID. Blockbuster's database system tracked your rentals, your preferences, your late fees. It felt modern, efficient, almost sophisticated. You weren't just a customer. You were a member. And the rituals, those small, repeated behaviors that become memory, formed naturally. Friday after school, parents would pile kids into the car and head to Blockbuster. Sometimes the decision was made ahead of time. More often, it wasn't. You'd walk the aisle slowly, debating. Comedy or action? Something new or a favorite you'd seen before? Kids would beg for candy from the brightly lit checkout counter. Parents would scan the rows of older films, hoping to introduce their children to something they'd loved years earlier. Blockbuster understood that renting a movie was only part of the experience. The stores sold popcorn, candy, soda. They stocked movie posters, entertainment magazines, and eventually video games. Walking into Blockbuster meant entering a space dedicated entirely to entertainment, to the idea that tonight could be special if you picked the right film. Employees became familiar faces. They wore blue polo shirts and name tags. In smaller towns, they knew regulars by name, remembered what you'd rented last week, offered recommendations. There was a human texture to the experience that mattered more than anyone realized at the time. Blockbuster was a gathering place, a third space between home and work, where people crossed paths, chatted in line, compared notes on what was worth watching. By the mid-90s, Blockbuster had become a cultural reference point. Comedians joked about late fees. Sitcoms featured characters debating rentals. The brand appeared in movies, magazines, and music videos. It was everywhere because it was normal, so woven into daily life that it felt permanent, inevitable, like grocery stores or gas stations. The company signed exclusive deals with major studios, ensuring Blockbuster got new releases before competitors. Revenue-sharing agreements allowed stores to stock more copies of popular films, reducing the frustration of sold-out titles. Blockbuster wasn't just renting movies. It was shaping how studios released them, how families consumed them, how America spent its weekends. There was something democratic about it, too. Blockbuster stores looked the same whether you were in a wealthy suburb or a working-class neighborhood. The selection was vast enough that everyone could find something. Parents rented family comedies. Teenagers grabbed horror films. Couples picked dramas. Blockbuster didn't curate taste. It offered choice, and that choice felt like freedom. The sound of the scanner beeping as your tapes were checked out. The plastic crinkle of the receipt, the reminder of the due date, always 2 days for new releases, 5 for older titles. The unspoken anxiety about late fees, which everyone complained about, but somehow everyone paid. These details, small and mundane at the time, became the texture of memory. Blockbuster nights weren't just about the movie. They were about the anticipation, the drive home with the tapes sitting on the passenger seat, the moment you slid the cassette into the VCR and pressed play, the ritual of rewinding before returning, "Be kind, rewind" stickers on every tape. It was a slower pace of entertainment, one that required leaving the house, making a choice, committing to it. By the time Blockbuster reached its stride in the mid-90s, it had become more than a business. It was a shared experience, a common language. Everyone knew what it meant to say, "Let's go to Blockbuster." It meant the weekend was starting. It meant time together. It meant possibility. And for a while, it seemed like it would last forever. There was a moment, brief but unmistakable, when Blockbuster felt less like a business and more like a piece of American infrastructure. Something as essential and enduring as the post office or the corner drugstore. By 1999, the company operated over 9,000 locations worldwide. Nearly 8,000 of them were in the United States. That meant you were never far from those blue and yellow signs. They glowed in strip malls and shopping centers from coast to coast, in small towns and sprawling suburbs, in places where entertainment options were few, and in cities where they were endless. Blockbuster was everywhere, and everywhere felt like home. Walking into a Blockbuster in its golden age meant stepping into a space that was both vast and intimate. The stores were large, some stretching 10,000 square feet or more, but they never felt cold or impersonal. The lighting was bright without being harsh. The carpet, usually a dark blue speckled pattern, absorbed sound and softened footsteps. The air carried a distinct smell, hard to describe, but impossible to forget. A mix of plastic VHS and DVD cases, faint popcorn from the concession area, and something else. Maybe the cleaners they used, or just the scent of possibility. It was a smell that meant the weekend had arrived. The layout was familiar, no matter which location you entered. New releases dominated the center and front walls, their bright covers facing outward in rows that seemed to stretch forever. Comedies occupied one section, dramas another, action films their own dedicated space. Horror movies lurked in a corner, often with a slightly darker aesthetic. The kids' section exploded with color, VHS spines featuring animated characters and bold lettering that children could spot from across the store. There was a rhythm to the browsing, a flow that customers understood instinctively. You started with new releases, moved to your favorite genre, maybe wandered into something unexpected, then circled back to make your final choice. Employees wore blue polo shirts with the Blockbuster logo embroidered on the chest and khaki pants. Many were teenagers working their first jobs, college students earning spending money, or local folks who knew the inventory by heart. The best employees became fixtures in their communities. They remembered what you rented last time. They offered recommendations based on your tastes. They held back copies of popular films for regulars. They were part of the ritual, the human thread that made Blockbuster feel like more than a transaction. The checkout counter was its own world. Candy bars and boxes of theater-style candy lined the impulse buy zone. Sour Patch Kids, Milk Duds, Junior Mints, Twizzlers. Kids pleaded for just one box. Parents relented more often than not. Microwave popcorn sat stacked nearby. The brands you recognized from grocery stores, but somehow more appealing here. Part of the full movie night package. The register beeped as the employee scanned your membership card, then your rentals. The receipt printed out with your return date in bold letters, a gentle reminder of the commitment you'd just made. 2 days for new releases, 5 days for older titles. The clock was already ticking. Late fees were the shadow side of the Blockbuster experience, the one element that generated both revenue and resentment. The company earned hundreds of millions of dollars annually from customers who returned films late, forgot about rentals buried under car seats, or simply misjudged their schedules. The fees added up quickly, sometimes surpassing the original rental cost. For Blockbuster, late fees were essential income. For customers, they were a source of frustration, guilt, and occasionally anger. You'd walk in to rent a new movie and discover you owed $12 from 3 weeks ago. The employee would politely inform you that your account was blocked until the balance was cleared. You'd pay, rent your new film, and promise yourself it wouldn't happen again. But it did. It always did. Still, people kept coming back. Because Blockbuster offered something no other entertainment option could replicate: the experience of choosing together. Families arrived on Friday evenings after dinner, sometimes still in work clothes, sometimes in weekend casual. Parents and children wandered separate sections, reconvening to negotiate. Teenagers arrived in groups, laughing too loud, debating whether to rent a comedy or something scary. Couples on date nights browsed side by side, testing compatibility through movie preferences. The store was a social space, a place where you ran into neighbors, classmates, co-workers. You'd stop and chat in the aisles, compare what you were renting, offer opinions on films you'd seen. The new release wall was the heart of every store, the place where hope and disappointment lived side by side. When a major film dropped on Tuesday, Blockbuster stocked dozens, sometimes hundreds of copies. But by Friday night, the popular titles were often gone. You'd scan the wall, searching for the one movie everyone wanted to see, and find only empty slots where the cases should have been. The disappointment was real, but so was the thrill when you found the last copy, tucked behind another case, or returned just moments before you arrived. It felt like luck, like the universe had aligned in your favor. Blockbuster nights carried a weight that streaming would never replicate. Once you left the store with your rentals, you were committed. You couldn't change your mind an hour later and pick something else. You couldn't scroll endlessly through options. You had made your choice, and now you had to live with it. That commitment was part of the magic. It forced you to settle in, to give the film a chance, to watch together without distraction. The TV became the center of attention. Phones didn't buzz with notifications. No one paused to check social media. You were present, together, in a way that feels almost quaint now. The stores themselves became landmarks. You gave directions based on them. Turn left at the Blockbuster. They anchored strip malls, drew foot traffic to neighboring businesses, and served as gathering points. Some locations stayed open until midnight, beacons of light in darkened shopping centers. Others closed earlier, but still felt like community hubs, places where people congregated not just to rent movies, but to feel connected to something larger than themselves. Blockbuster's golden age wasn't just about the company's financial success or market dominance, though both were staggering. It was about the role the brand played in American life. It was about the memories formed in those aisles, the traditions built around Friday night visits, the shared language of late fees and Be Kind Rewind stickers. It was about the way Blockbuster made entertainment feel like an event, something worth leaving the house for, something that brought people together in physical space. For a while, it seemed like it would last forever. The stores were too numerous, too embedded in daily routines, too profitable to imagine a world without them. Blockbuster had survived the transition from VHS to DVD, adapting quickly and thriving. The company had become synonymous with movie rentals, a brand so dominant that competitors struggled to gain footing. Walking past those blue and yellow signs, seeing the lights glowing through the windows, it was impossible to imagine they would ever go dark. But they would, and sooner than anyone expected. The first crack didn't feel like one. In 1997, a small startup called Netflix launched from a California office with an idea that seemed almost quaint. Mail-order DVD rentals. No storefronts. No browsing. No human interaction. Just a website, a queue, and red envelopes arriving in mailboxes a few days later. Most people had never heard of it. Blockbuster certainly wasn't worried. Why would anyone wait for movies to arrive by mail when they could drive 5 minutes to a store that had everything right now? But Netflix had something Blockbuster didn't. No late fees. That alone was revolutionary. For years, customers had quietly seethed over Blockbuster's penalties. A $2 rental could balloon into $15 if you forgot to return it. Accounts were frozen. Families argued. The resentment built slowly, a low hum beneath the blue and yellow glow. Netflix promised freedom from that anxiety. Keep a movie as long as you wanted. Mail it back whenever. Another would arrive. It felt generous. It felt respectful. Blockbuster's leadership dismissed it. John Antioco, who became CEO in 1997, focused on expanding the brand into music, games, and international markets. Blockbuster was everywhere, dominant, seemingly untouchable. The company had survived format changes before. This would be no different. In 2000, Netflix's founders approached Blockbuster with an offer. Buy us for $50 million. They pitched a partnership where Netflix would handle online rentals, while Blockbuster managed stores. Antioco and his team said no. $50 million seemed absurd for a company barely breaking even. The meeting ended. The opportunity passed. It would become one of the most famous rejections in business history. But at the time, it felt reasonable. Blockbuster had nearly $6 billion in revenue. Netflix was a curiosity. Then, the ground began shifting in ways no one fully understood yet. Broadband internet spread into American homes. Computers got faster. DVDs replaced VHS completely, and they were easier to mail, easier to store, easier to stream. By the mid-2000s, Netflix had millions of subscribers. Blockbuster finally responded in 2004 with its own mail service, Blockbuster Online, and briefly eliminated late fees. But the late fee reversal was messy and confusing, replaced by restocking fees that felt like the same thing under a different name. Customers felt betrayed. Trust eroded. Meanwhile, another competitor emerged from an unexpected place: grocery stores and gas stations. Redbox installed bright red kiosks that rented DVDs for $1 a night. No membership, no commitment, just a vending machine with new releases. It was fast, cheap, and everywhere. Blockbuster's pricing suddenly felt expensive. $5 for a few nights versus $1 from a machine outside Walmart. Families started choosing convenience and cost over the ritual. Blockbuster tried to adapt. Stores were remodeled. The company launched a subscription service. There were attempts at streaming, at digital downloads, at reinvention. But the debt was enormous. The company had been bought and sold multiple times, leveraged heavily, burdened with obligations that made agility impossible. Leadership changed. Strategies shifted. Nothing caught hold. By 2010, the weight became too much. Blockbuster filed for bankruptcy. The announcement felt surreal to people who had grown up with the brand. How could something so permanent just end? The closures came in waves. First a few hundred stores, then 1,000, then more. Going out of business sales filled the aisles with bargain hunters, picking through used DVDs and store fixtures. Shelves emptied. Posters came down. Blue and yellow signs were removed from strip malls, leaving faded rectangles on brick walls where the logos had been. Employees who had worked the same location for years found themselves suddenly jobless. The community they had built dissolved overnight. Customers walked past dark windows, peering inside at empty spaces that had once glowed with possibility. For the people who had made Blockbuster part of their lives, the disappearance felt personal. It wasn't just a store closing. It was the end of a ritual. Friday nights lost their shape. Families stopped piling into the car for that weekly trip. Teenagers no longer had that neutral ground to meet and browse. Parents couldn't take their children to the same aisles where they had once stood as kids themselves. The texture of the experience, the carpet under your feet, the plastic cases in your hands, the employee who knew your name, vanished. By 2014, corporate ownership had changed hands again. Dish Network bought the bankrupt brand and closed almost everything. A few dozen franchises remained, independently owned, operating on momentum and nostalgia. But even those dwindled. One by one, the last locations turned off their lights. Bend, Oregon. Anchorage, Alaska. Lone survivors in a landscape that had moved on. And then, just Bend. One store. One Blockbuster left in the entire world, kept alive by a community that refused to let it go, and a manager who understood what it meant to people. The story of Blockbuster's fall is often told as a failure of vision, a cautionary tale about ignoring disruption. And that's true. But it's also about something quieter and sadder. The loss of a third place, a shared space where people gathered without agenda. Streaming was more convenient, cheaper, faster. But it was also solitary. You didn't leave your house. You didn't bump into neighbors. You didn't compromise on a choice or discover something unexpected on a shelf. The algorithm replaced the employee's recommendation. The queue replaced the wall of new releases. Progress erased the ritual. Blockbuster didn't just lose to better technology. It lost to a world that had stopped gathering the same way. Malls were emptying. Retail was moving online. Families were busier, more fragmented. Screens multiplying in every room. The Friday night trip required time, coordination, presence. It required everyone to agree, to be together, to make it an event. As life sped up, that kind of intentional togetherness became harder to protect. Blockbuster was built for a slower world, and that world was ending. The last shelves were cleared quietly. The last memberships expired. The last receipts printed. And in the silence that followed, people realized what they had lost. Not just a store, but a feeling. Not just movies, but a reason to leave the house together. Not just convenience, but connection. The last Blockbuster stands on a quiet corner in Bend, Oregon. Not as a relic frozen in time, but as a working store, still renting movies, still stocking shelves, still turning on the lights every morning. The blue and yellow sign still glows against the mountain sky. Inside, the carpet is the same dark blue. The shelves are organized by genre. New releases line the front wall. There's candy at the counter. It looks exactly like you remember, because it never stopped being what it was. People come from across the country now, not just to rent a movie, but to stand in those aisles again, to remember what it felt like. Tourists take photos by the entrance. Families bring their children to show them something they can't quite explain. A feeling, a ritual, a piece of their own childhoods that exists nowhere else anymore. The store has become a pilgrimage site, a living museum, where you can still slide a membership card across the counter and walk out with a DVD in a plastic case. The manager, Sandy Harding, has worked there for years. She knows what the store means. It's not just nostalgia, it's proof that it was real. Online, Blockbuster lives in memory. There are forums and social media groups where people share stories, first dates that started in the comedy aisle, summer nights spent rewinding tapes, the panic of returning a rental 5 minutes before close. Someone posts a photo of an old membership card, still tucked in their wallet after 15 years. Someone else shares a picture of an abandoned Blockbuster, windows papered over, weeds growing through the parking lot. The comments fill with people who worked there, who met their spouse there, who remember the smell of popcorn and carpet cleaner like it was yesterday. There are collectors now too, people who hunt down old Blockbuster signs, employee uniforms, promotional standees. They buy them on auction sites and display them in basements and home theaters. It's not about the objects themselves. It's about preserving a piece of something that mattered. A blue polo shirt, a torn ticket logo, a "Be Kind, Rewind" sticker. These things carry weight because they represent a version of American life that doesn't exist anymore. A slower pace, a shared experience, a reason to leave the house. Blockbuster's influence didn't vanish with the stores. If you look closely, you can see its fingerprints everywhere. Netflix's recommendation algorithm grew from the idea that people needed help choosing, something Blockbuster employees did naturally. The grid layout of streaming services mimics the organized rows of a video store. Even the language persists. We still talk about browsing, about new releases, about adding something to our queue. The structure of how we find entertainment today was shaped by the decades Blockbuster spent teaching America how to rent movies. But something was lost in the translation. Streaming is convenient, instant, infinite. You can watch anything, anytime, alone in bed at 2 a.m. There's no commitment, no trip, no debate with your family about what to watch. No moment when you have to choose, really choose, because you can always stop and scroll to something else. The friction is gone, and with it, the ritual. Blockbuster nights required presence. You had to get in the car, walk through the doors, move through the aisles together, negotiate, compromise, agree on something everyone could live with. Then you had to go home and actually watch it, because you'd already made the trip, already paid the rental fee. You were invested. The movie mattered more because you'd chosen it together, because it was the only thing you had for the next 2 days. That weight, that intentionality. It's hard to replicate when everything is one click away. The people who worked at Blockbuster remember what it felt like to be part of that. They weren't just retail employees. They were guides, curators, part of the neighborhood. They knew the regulars. They made recommendations. They set aside new releases for customers they knew would want them. When the stores closed, they didn't just lose jobs. They lost a role in their communities. Some of them still gather online, sharing memories of truck nights and rushes, and the satisfaction of helping someone find the perfect movie. There's a bittersweet comfort in knowing that one store remains. It means Blockbuster isn't entirely gone. It means you can still go there, still feel it, still rent a movie the old way if you're willing to travel to Bend. But it also underscores how much was lost. 9,000 stores once, now one. All those neighborhoods, all those Friday nights, all those millions of small moments, gone. Blockbuster didn't just rent movies. It gave people a reason to gather, a place to go that wasn't home or work. A third space where you could browse without buying, linger without pressure, run into neighbors, feel part of something larger than yourself. When the stores closed, communities lost more than a business. They lost a gathering place, a landmark, a shared reference point. What remains now is memory. And memory, it turns out, is stubborn. It refuses to let go. People still say Blockbuster night, even though there's no Blockbuster to go to. They still feel a pang when they pass an empty strip mall space that used to glow blue and yellow. They still remember the weight of a VHS case, the smell of popcorn, the thrill of finding the last copy. These things live on because they mattered, because they were woven into the fabric of ordinary American life in a way that felt permanent, even though nothing ever is. Blockbuster's legacy isn't just about what it was. It's about what it represented, a time when entertainment required effort, when choosing meant something, when families had to leave the house and be together in a shared space. It's a reminder that convenience isn't the same as connection, that ease isn't the same as meaning, that the things we remember most aren't always the things that were easiest. The last Blockbuster will close someday. Maybe soon, maybe years from now. And when it does, the lights will go out for good. But the memory won't. It will live in the people who were there, who walked those aisles, who made it part of their lives. And as long as the memory lives, Blockbuster will never be completely gone. Blockbuster's story isn't really about a video rental company that failed to adapt. It's about the way American life used to feel, about the rituals we built around simple things, about the spaces we shared before we carried entire libraries in our pockets, about the friction that made choosing matter, that made watching together feel earned. For a generation, Blockbuster was woven into the fabric of ordinary life. It marked time, Friday nights, snow days, first dates, sick days, home from school. The store was a destination that required leaving the house, walking aisles with people you loved, negotiating what everyone could agree on. It demanded presence. It created memories not just of the movies themselves, but of the choosing, the driving, the anticipation, the commitment to sitting together without the option to scroll away. When Blockbuster disappeared, something larger vanished with it. Not just a business model, but a kind of communal experience that's harder to find now. The third spaces where Americans gathered without buying much or staying long. The neighborhood landmarks that gave directions teeming. The employees who knew your name and what you liked. The shared language of late fees and sold-out new releases. And be kind, rewind. We gained convenience. We can watch anything, anytime, anywhere. We don't drive in the rain, or argue in aisles, or pay penalties for forgetting to return a tape. But we lost something too. The texture of it. The way entertainment used to require a little effort, a little intention. The way choosing one movie meant something because you couldn't change your mind halfway through. The way you had to be together, in the same room, committed to the same 2 hours. Blockbuster reminds us that the things we assume will always be there, the rituals that feel permanent, can vanish faster than we expect. That progress and loss often arrive together. That convenience isn't the same as connection. That the details we took for granted, the smell of popcorn, the glow of blue and yellow, the sound of a VHS case snapping shut, become precious only after they're gone. Memory keeps these places alive. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. Enough to remember what it felt like. Enough to recognize what we've lost, along with what we've gained. Enough to understand that Blockbuster's story is also our story. A chapter in the larger tale of how American life has changed, how the spaces we shared have slowly disappeared, how the things that once brought us together have been replaced by things we experience alone. These stories matter because they're ours. They belong to the families who made Friday night trips a tradition, to the teenagers who worked behind the counter, to the kids who begged for one more candy bar, to everyone who walked through those automatic doors and felt, for a moment, the thrill of infinite possibility. We tell stories like this every day to keep America's memories alive. If you'd like to join us for more forgotten brands, consider subscribing. Your support truly helps.